bring in Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live co-host, and, of course, Football Night in America insider. Where do you want to start? Which situation piques your interest the most, Mike?
Well, you're already talking about the man of the moment, Kyler Murray. He'll be released next week. And the key here is, Dan, the Cardinals owe him $36.8 million fully guaranteed for 2026. He can do what Russell Wilson did 2 years ago, take the minimum on a one-year deal, stick his former team with the balance, because nobody's going to pay him more than $36.8 million for 2026. And you go to a team at a low cost. That team saves millions in cash and potential cap space to put a good team around you. So that in and of itself makes him desirable because he can sign for $1.3 million. In fact, I would suggest if he's got multiple suitors, his position should be, I want a no trade clause and I want a no tag clause. I want a true one-year arrangement and I go wherever I want next year, and you don't get into this Daniel Jones situation where you got the transition tag. You are a true free agent a year from now if you have the kind of year that sets you up for a big payday.
Okay, if I look at his first 3 years in Arizona, those are respectable numbers. And then I think he had another season that he threw for, 3,800 yards as well. So there's, 4 years out of 6 years with Kyler Murray? I mean, that's a good sample size. I just don't know what the perception is around the league with him, either as a football player or is it everything attached to that football player?
Well, Dan, I think the relationship with Arizona went off the rails after his third season, and it was time for him to get a new contract. The worst thing the Cardinals could have done was jam that stupid-ass study clause. Can I say stupid-ass? I just said it twice.
You did it twice.
Into his contract. Because, as I said earlier today on PFT Live, the moment that thought enters your brain, if you're Michael Bidwell, the owner of the Cardinals, the moment you actually say it out loud and put it in writing, that's when they should have traded him. If you have those kinds of misgivings about a guy that you've had 3 years with, and if you think he doesn't work hard enough to the point where you're willing to put it in writing that he's got an obligation to put in 20 hours a week of study, that's when you sell high. That's when you trade him to another team. Look where they are 4 years later. What have they done in the 4 years since then? Nothing. They would have gotten so much more if they had flipped Kyler Murray once they realized we've got concerns about him. But they felt compelled to pay him. They felt compelled to justify using the first overall pick on him. And here's where they are. Not just letting him walk away for nothing, letting him walk away and owing him net $35.5 million if he does a one-year deal for the veteran minimum.
I would still take a chance on it. If I'm Minnesota, Atlanta, put him indoors, and I would take a chance on him, Mike.
Dan, last year, as we were getting close to the trade deadline, I was casting a wide net to see which players who we might not be thinking of could be available in trade. And at the time, it was obvious something odd was going on between the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. He hadn't played in several weeks, and I poked around whether or not he could be traded. Now, there were too many moving parts. The contract would have to be addressed. Too much needed to be done in a short time frame for a trade to happen. But I was told at the time there were two teams he wanted to play for. The Raiders, because they had Chip Kelly. Well, that ship has sailed. And the Vikings, because of Kevin O'Connell. And where are the Vikings right now? They've got J.J. McCarthy. They're clearly looking for anyone and everyone that potentially could come in and bolster that depth chart a year after they made the bad decision of not having an established veteran on the roster. Here's Kyler Murray for $1.3 million. How could they say no to that? Unless Kevin O'Connell is in the camp, and there's a camp out there of coaches who just don't want a guy who's south of 6'2", no matter who it is. I don't want a short quarterback. There's going to be coaches like that. But you mentioned the Falcons. Kevin Stefanski's already had short quarterback in Cleveland and Dylan Gabriel. I think the wild card in Atlanta is whether or not 6'5" Matt Ryan, the president of football operations, says, no. We can't have a guy who's under 6 feet tall playing quarterback.
And Stefanski had Baker Mayfield as well in Cleveland.
Right.
Tua got a chance to be a starter next year?
It depends on where the other dominoes fall. I love the quarterback carousel. The coaching carousel has to come to a complete stop. We know where all the head coaches are. We know their coordinators are. And now we can start trying to figure out where these quarterbacks are going to land. And there's a chance somebody's going to talk themselves into Tua based upon the good things he did with the Miami Dolphins. He wasn't horrible. He did enough to get them to give him a market value contract, even though that was ridiculous that they paid him when they did. They weren't bidding against anyone but themselves. He was under contract for another year. Sure, let's give him $55 million a year. That was a huge mistake. That was almost a Deshaun Watson level mistake by the Miami Dolphins. But if you get him in the right circumstances, you put him in the right offense, he can make things happen. The problem for him is that when the play that's there or the play that's called isn't there, things kind of short circuit. But he's not alone. Kirk Cousins falls into that camp. There are plenty of quarterbacks who do a fine job at the NFL level who aren't capable of the Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen make magic when things go sideways. So there will be someone who will talk themselves into the possibility of giving him an opportunity, and he's going to be in that same boat as Kyler, $1.3 million on a one-year deal because the Dolphins owe him $54 million fully guaranteed this year.
Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live, co-host. The transition tag with Daniel Jones. You've allowed Anthony Richardson to seek a trade someplace else. You've kind of taken away your leverage here a little bit, I would think, with Daniel Jones, haven't you, if you're Indianapolis?
Well, I think the Colts are content to see what a team will offer him on a long-term deal, given that he's still recovering from a torn Achilles tendon that happened less than 3 months ago. And for him, he's got a great bird in the hand here. $37.8 million. All he's got to do is sign his name to the offer, and he gets it with no exceptions, no limitations, doesn't have to pass a physical by this day, this day. You know, sometimes you'll see contracts that have those in there when you got a guy coming off a serious injury. He gets $37.8. Last year, he got $14. It's been a good year for Daniel Jones. And now let's just see if someone offers him the kind of long-term contract that he would accept, and then the Colts would have the opportunity to match it. And I don't know that anyone's going to do it, but worst case scenario for Jones, well, the worst case scenario is the Colts rescind the transition tender and then he's a free agent after all the money has flowed. But if he just plays under the transition tag this year, that's $37.8 for a guy that we thought when the Giants cut him, his days of making big money in the NFL were over.
We do this every year. I caution teams every year. Look at what happens on Saturdays, not what happens on a Thursday or Friday in Indianapolis at the Combine. We fall in love with these moments here, these players here, and I still go back to what did you do in an actual game situation? But can you give me a couple of names since you were there where you go, what they did is going to elevate their draft status, and rightfully so?
Well, I mean, you look at what Sonny Styles, the Ohio State linebacker, did, just off the charts across the boards. You've got the Arkansas quarterback who had eye-popping numbers, and he's 6'4", 225. Those are things that can help. But you're right, Dan. We have seen what a guy does when it's 11 on 11.
But doesn't it make you pause, though, Mike, when you go, look at all of that talent that guy has, and then you go, well, what did he do on Saturdays? How did Sonny Styles not wreak havoc where we go, oh, my God, he's the next Micah Parsons?
And that's a great question. Well, you got a bunch of other great defenders. Maybe the other guys were getting to the ball before he could. I don't know. But Dan, this is where I think bad teams, dysfunctional teams get infatuated by measurables, by analytics, by numbers, and they lose sight of the eyeball test as it relates to what the guy does on the field. Remember Vernon Golston? He was the pass rusher from Ohio State, and he ended up going a lot higher than he should have because he had all the measurables. But what happens when you get in a game? What do you do to make a difference when it's time to go out there and use those skills in a very different setting? So the good teams get it. The good teams know it's just one piece of a bigger puzzle. And sometimes the bad teams put too much emphasis on the wrong things, whether it's what a guy does in underwear in Indianapolis or, sometimes they put too much emphasis on what a guy does in college because you look at what he did in this game against a MAC school and you get infatuated by that and you overlook what he did when it was time to go play one of the top schools if he didn't have a big day that day. So it's complicated, and we see that certain teams have figured it out and certain teams haven't.
The market for Malik Willis is what?
Well, a GM told me last week that the thinking is between $20 to $25 million on a 2 or a 3 year deal. Shorter term is better for Malik Willis because if he goes somewhere and he plays for a full season like he did when he got opportunities the last 2 years with the Packers, then he'll be in line to get paid a much bigger salary. I think there's two teams to watch who are going to be the ultimate litmus test here, the Dolphins and the Cardinals, because you've got two guys from Green Bay the past 2 years who are now calling the shots in Miami, and John Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley. They know Malik Willis, not just when we see him play. They know him all the time. They know him in the meeting room. They know him on the practice field. They know what he can do. If they're not in on Malik Willis, that's a red flag for anyone else who doesn't know him. And with the Cardinals, Matt LaFleur, the head coach of the Packers, his brother, Mike, is the head coach of the Cardinals now. I'd like to think that Matt would say to Mike, hey, man, I know you need a quarterback. This may be a guy that you want to take a look at because I think he can do it all season long. Because when he played the last 2 years, the numbers, 134 plus passer rating, averaging more than 10 yards per attempt, 75% plus completion percentage. The guy has been very good, but as I was cautioned last week, you got to understand why he wasn't very good in Tennessee as part of the overall picture. The Titans gave him away for a 7th-round pick, Dan.
You make great points there. Before I let you go, the Drew Dolman situation with the Bears. Here's a high-end center who just got paid last year. He's 27. He walks in and he says, I'm retiring. Do we know anything more about this?
Well, when I thought about the situation last night, and the Bears could try to seek $4 million back from him because he got a $6 million signing bonus on a 3-year deal. Technically, he hasn't earned that $4 million, and the collective bargaining agreement lets the Bears go get it if they choose to. And I thought last night, when you look at what he did on the first year of his contract, he had a career season, played every snap in the regular season, started 19 games if we include the playoffs, Pro Bowler. Was he maybe looking for an adjustment and the Bears said no, and this is part of a broader leverage play? And I poked around a little on that. My understanding is that's not the case. He's just done. And nobody knows their body better than the players. 5 years of wear and tear. And, I say this all the time with anyone. Remember when Vontae Davis retired during a game? Like, the moment that you're no longer willing to go out on the field and subject yourself to that physical toll, the risk that happens on every snap, the moment you're not willing to do it, then you shouldn't. And I respect it whenever a guy decides he's had enough. And by all indications, Drew Dolman decided he'd had enough.
Vontae Davis retiring at halftime, though. That feels like a 30 for 30, Mike.
Well, it was a hell of a story when it happened. But again, the moment that you don't want to do it, for whatever reason, it takes so much to go out there and subject yourself to that. And I think if you're out there and you don't want to be, you're just asking for an injury. You're asking for a bad outcome. You've got to be all in to survive, not just thrive, but survive in the NFL.
What's the Combine's future?
Well, fortunately, guys like Jerry Jones have realized the prospect of making it a traveling road show, which was a hot topic 5 or 6 years ago, that's died down because we already see coaches not go. If this thing was less convenient than it is in Indianapolis, and it's perfect in Indianapolis. Everything is close together. The city isn't overrun by fans. The coaches, the scouts, they can get to where they need to be quickly. If it's in LA or something like that, and you got to drive 2 hours here and 2 hours there, you'll have fewer coaches go. I think what happened, Dan, a decade or so ago, it felt like the Combine was on a trajectory to become a massive offseason tentpole for the NFL. I think we've gotten to the point where it kind of is what it is. Last year on the Saturday for the quarterback, receiver, and running back workouts, they averaged 484,000 viewers. That's nothing as it relates to what the NFL usually does. So I think they recognize it for what it is. It started as a way to get everybody together so you could do medical examination of all the players in one spot so you don't have to drag them all over the country and getting poked and prodded here and there. I think people recognize it for what it isn't, and they recognize it for what it is, and I think it's going to stay in Indianapolis.
Mike Florio's latest novel, Big Shield, available. Of course, it's not about the NFL. It's on Amazon.
Well, it is.
Oh, it is about the NFL.
Yeah, it's been 7 months. What the hell?
Oh,
let's
you're not
drop the
worried?
facade.
You're not worried?
No, I'm not worried. Bring it on.
Statute of
Bring
limitations. Available on Amazon in ebook form for only 99 cents. It's a tale of the mob and pro sports in the age of legalized gambling, and it might be based on the NFL.
It might be.
Thank you, Mike.
And the NBA. Thank you, Dan.
We'll come back with more phone calls right after this.